Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you everyone for attending, and it's a great pleasure for me to be part of this great series. So today I would like to talk about soil carbon storage, as Paul said, and specifically what I want to do is to share some results from the literature that covered various aspects of what makes carbon stay in the soil, and also give you some examples from the work from my research group. So probably I do not need with this group of people to say anything specific about why soil organic matter is so important for soil fertility, for soil health, for soil's role in protecting environment, and for soil's role in mitigating climate change effects. So for all of that, soil carbon is most instrumental. And so what I would like to go straight into is a very brief outline of the key mechanisms that make carbon get into the soil and make it stay there. Because what we are after, that is increase in soil organic matter, is a result of this balance between the carbon that comes into the soil and the carbon that leaves it. So how does it come in? The lion's share would come from the plants. The plants, through a process of photosynthesis, take CO2 from the atmosphere, use it to build their bodies, and including their roots, and put a lot of that, leave a lot of it into the soil. And agricultural crops, for once, they play a major role in it as well. And all agricultural crops annually, they put more than 1 billion tons of carbon underground. So So the biggest input of carbon from the plants that goes directly in the soil is, of course, root biomass, but also some of it comes from shoots and above ground biomass when the above ground materials are incorporated into the soil with tillage. But by far, roots play the biggest portion of what's put in. And one important part about the root-derived carbon is that it has been shown that it is retained in soils much more efficiently than the above-ground inputs from leaves and shoots that happen to be incorporated by tillage or getting in the soil through soil faunal activities. But besides that sheer root biomass, there are invisible ways of carbon inputs, such as root exudates and rhizo deposits. Roots put out large quantities of soluble organics as root exudates. It's something that we cannot see with our naked eyes, and something that is very difficult to measure and to actually take out of the soil. But some people estimated that that root exudation can make up to 70% of the net primary production. So it can play a major role as a source of carbon inputs in the soil. Another important but invisible, again, way through which carbon gets from plants into the soil is fungi. So mycorrhizal associations between plant roots and fungal hyphae, they serve as the routes for carbon to go from the plant into the fungi and end up in the soil as fungi decompose there or pass it on to other microorganisms. It is, again, something that we cannot see, but this mechanism plays an important role in carbon input and soil organic matter building. So when it's in, then how does it leave the soil? Most of it will leave the soil respired as CO2 through activities of soil fauna and soil microbes. A very small portion will also leave as will be leached as soluble organic carbon compounds. They can be leached from the soil layer into the parent materials and into the groundwater potentially. But as compared to losses through decomposition and soil respiration of CO2 into atmosphere, that is a relatively minor source. So overall, what contributes to overall in this big picture of events, how much goes where? If let's say we say that 10 tons of carbon was created through primary production, then about a third of that is estimated to go into the soil. And from there, some 1-2% is the only thing that will remain in the soil. Most of it will be decomposed by microbes. Some of it will be decomposed by fauna, and eventually all of it will leave soil as CO2. So what can we do to increase that 1-2%, to increase that amount to make it stored in the soil longer? So it seems that that quite conceptually should be quite simple, right? So we should increase inputs and we should decrease losses. So what could be so complicated there? But unfortunately, when it comes to soil processes, there is really nothing simple. Even the most straightforward concepts seem to work in unexpected way or not work at all. So let me start with increasing the inputs. And here are just three main things I want to mention. So the most straightforward are direct additions of organic material to soil, manure, and compost. Increasing the above ground biomass, right? Because that also can get into the soil and contribute to carbon storage. Increase inputs from below ground sources, below ground biomass, rhizo deposits, and root exudates. Direct additions of manure and compost. This seems to be the most straightforward concept as far as increasing soil organic matter, and that adding manure to soil is probably as old a method as agriculture itself, and some ancient Romans were writing treatises on how best to manure their soils. So that's actually my personal experience. You know, that's the first thing I've heard about soil management was from my grandmother, who was illiterate, but she was very proud of her vegetable garden, and she was boasting how her vegetable garden is much better than her neighbor's. And the reason, according to her, was that she was using manure and her neighbor was not. So that kind of made a big impression on me of what that manure can do to your vegetable production. So here I have two examples. One comes from Rosented Experiment Station, the oldest agricultural experiment station in the world in the UK. There they compared the experiments with just mineral fertilization versus manure applications. In some 16 to 28 years, application of manure resulted in very sizable increases in soil organic matter, both in topsoil and also in subsoil. On the right is the example from close to my home, from Kellogg Biological Station in Michigan, living field lab experiment of compost application for 7 years. Again, you can see nice increase in soil organic matter due to compost use in topsoil and the positive trend starting to build up in the subsoil. So, of course, these days, manure and compost applications, there are a lot of logistic and technical issues with their use. There are concerns with environmental pollution. There are concerns with pathogens, so it's not that all simple, just applying them on a large scale. But if we can, that seems to be the, the straightforward and working technique that can get your soil organic matter up reasonably quickly. Above ground biomass. So can we increase our soil organic matter by increasing the amount of plant residues, about above ground biomass that are left on the surface of the soil? So those residues decomposing on the soil surface, there will be decomposition products leaching from the decomposing residue into the soil, contributing to soil organic matter building. So there should be benefit from that. But it seems that, yes, the benefit might be there, but it's really not that great. So a summary of literature from 21 long-term studies and going anywhere from 4 to 40 plus years of residue removal, only in 4 of those studies, there was a negative effect of removing the residue on soil organic matter level. And here are the results from a study from nearby Canada. There they were removing a portion of straw from the soil surface for some good 50 years. And that didn't have a negative effect on soil organic matter. So it seems that what we leave on the soil surface as residues, even though in theory it should have a positive effect, but in practice it's not that sizable. Increasing the inputs from plant roots. The ideal solution that I'm imagining in my head is that we would have crops with deep root systems that would be just directly depositing a lot of carbon underground without, of course, their yields being jeopardized. I'm hearing about all these engineering ideas and factories of how carbon can be captured from the atmosphere and put into some deep underground storage, and factories being built to do that. And I keep thinking that we are surrounded by those factories all around us. Every plant is such a factory. So it's just a matter of maximizing what they do, or focusing the breeding and genetics programs on maximizing that. But this is not something that is available yet. Even I'm hoping that we will soon see such varieties of commercial crops that would not only have good yields, but also will provide increased carbon inputs. To me, it seems that the next best alternative to that is that we do have now is cover crops, which do add carbon underground and do not jeopardize crop yields in the process. So cover crops, again, here is a summary of a number of studies and that demonstrated that using cover crops is a way to increase your soil organic matter. And vast majority of those surveyed studies, there was there were gains in soil organic carbon. Here on the bottom is an example, again, close to my home, from Kellogg Biological Station, LTR. Here we're comparing conventional management with organic management that relies on cover crops. And you can see in 12 years, yes, in topsoil, we do see this positive effect of cover cropping on organic carbon yield, organic carbon gains, and we do see the beginning of a positive trend in subsoil as well. This organic cover crop management that LTR at KBS has, it keeps me amazed whenever I think about their soil carbon results, because it is being very heavily tilled. For weed control, it's been tilled very intensively, much more so than the conventional management. And even though, despite of all the odds of that heavy tillage and not so great overall plant growth, then nevertheless that there is that increase in soil organic carbon that just to me tells a lot of the power of cover cropping as a tool for soil organic matter increases in the long term. So when it comes to that below ground increases, should we go for total root biomass? And overall, I would say definitely yes. I don't have a literature example here, but overall, it's very often higher root biomass is found to be associated with greater soil organic matter accumulation over long run. What I would like to show you is an example showing that root biomass is not everything we should be focusing on. And here I want to show you the results from two systems one is monoculture switchgrass, another is native succession vegetation, basically old field vegetation. You have the picture of those switchgrass and old field here. So what this first set of graphs shows is the root biomass from those two systems. After 5 years of them being cropped in Michigan at Kellogg Biological Station and in Wisconsin. And you can see that in both of those sites, switchgrass root biomass is just incomparable to what that old field plants produce. It tons of root systems. Again, many of you probably aware of how massive that root system of switchgrass can be. So I show you a graph like that, and you probably thinking, well, I know what soil carbon is going to look like, and switchgrass is going to have much more, but actually it's the other way around. So after those same 5 years of implementation, the old field vegetation led to increase in soil carbon, and switchgrass, it just barely kept it at the same level where it was. So the bottom line is that just the sheer biomass of the roots that are down there in the soil, it does not necessarily mean quick increase in the soil organic matter storage. Other things we need to think about that are important and might be even more important than the sheer root biomass. And those would be those small, fine things that we are not really observing with our naked eyes. Very fine roots, root hairs, those root cells as part of rhizodeposits, root exudates. All of those things, they are continuously there when during the live plant growth. So basically maximizing live plant growth, the period when there is live plant coverage, as what happens when we have cover cropping, is definitely a way to increase those invisible below ground inputs, which nevertheless have a sizable effect on soil organic matter increases or gains. So now let me move to the losses part. How do we decrease them? And here it seems to me there are two simple ways to go. One would be, well, let's make sure that what we're putting in is hard to decompose. Or let's make sure that what we put in is actually hidden from the microbes or fauna or whoever is there to decompose it. So on the first strategy, increasing the inputs of recalcitrant organic materials, it makes a lot of sense, right? And it's actually, if you remember what I said earlier about how roots contribute more to soil organic, to soil carbon storage than shoots, they do that in part because they are more recalcitrant. In the table here are lignin contents of shoots and roots of a number of plant species. And you can see that everywhere, every single species has more lignin in their roots than in their shoots. So they are more recalcitrant, yes. But what has been relatively recently demonstrated and kind of put in place as a picture of what matters, what kind of inputs matter most for promoting soil organic matter gains, is that the recalcitrant inputs really don't work that great. They will be eventually decomposed, maybe slower, but they will be gone, and they do not contribute that much to the long-term carbon gains. That's what we want. But very surprisingly and counterintuitive, it is actually the labile carbon inputs, the ones that are easily decomposed, they are most instrumental for the long-term soil carbon gains. So that's a bit about that recalcitrant thing. Now increasing the protection, so it's hiding the carbon inputs from the decomposers. Here we have again these two strategies that you can think about. One is physical protection, that is carbon is trapped in very tight spaces like that little piece of root or root hair inside the aggregate. The root dies, the entrance is sealed, and that piece of root hair stays there, not decomposed, because microbes cannot get to it. And even if they do in the tiny pore, there are anaerobic conditions not very good for microbes to grow and live in. Or another mechanism is sorption of those organic compounds onto mineral surfaces, like them getting connected to clay minerals, getting in between those clay platelets, or being connected to iron or aluminum oxides. So when that happened, even though physically microbes can, crawl over those types of compounds, they cannot break them through their enzyme tools. So what we can do to maximize efficiency of those two mechanisms. One is that you're probably all very well aware of is to reduce soil disturbance. So tillage is what breaks soil apart and what breaks many of those hiding places where stored carbon was kept, and making it available to decomposers again. Again, here is a summary figure from a review that looked at the effect of conversion from conventional tillage to no-till based on a very large number of experiments, 67. And as you can see, regardless of what was the actual crop system that was studied there, in all of them, to some lower, some higher extent, that conversion resulted in increase in soil carbon. So reducing tillage is definitely something that works for improving carbon storage by reducing that loss part. But another thing to keep in mind, and here I'm, related again to what I said about our now recent improved understanding of the importance of labile carbon inputs for long-term carbon protection, is that its products of microbial decomposition is what can be very well protected, can be actually better protected than the original plant inputs into the soil. And the reason is in large because of where those microbial decomposition products are in the soil. The thing is, by nature of where microbes live, their decomposition products, they can be readily attached to surfaces of those clay minerals and those oxides I mentioned, be protected there. And so then in essence, the higher microbial activity we have in the soil, again, as counterintuitive as that might be, and the more access those microbes have to both plant inputs and to the soil materials where the decomposition products can be protected in, the more long-term soil carbon storage we will have. So thinking about then what is at play in here, microbes, they live in soil pores, and the architecture of the pore space in soil that defines many aspects of the activities and what will eventually happen with soil carbon. So what we've been observing is that pores in some 10th micron size range, they seem to be like microbial prime real estate in the soil because they provide sufficient physical space. They are the ones where the roots grow in and provide nutrients, and they are the ones that provide optimal water supply and optimal oxygen conditions. So in the systems where that optimal prime real estate pores are in abundance, where they evenly spread through the entire soil matrix, are the places where the microbial decomposition products will have the biggest access to the largest volume of those mineral surfaces of the soil matrix, to those clay particles, to those oxides, where they can be stuck and protected from further decomposition. So the things to keep in mind, what we can do to increase soil carbon storage by increasing that protection is, again, stimulate counterintuitively the activity of soil organisms and stimulate development of optimal soil pore architecture. One route of what will work for getting both of those things done is increasing plant diversity. So again, it's something that has been shown in almost every study that looks at plant diversity, as this study from Minnesota demonstrates that the more diverse system we have, the more carbon storage there will be. Here it's a number of plant species in the system on the x-axis, and soil carbon storage after some years of implementation. You can see there is this linear increase as a function of number of species. It's similar to what we, again, observing at Kellogg Biological Station, as the number of species here on the x-axis increases, so does the total carbon after some 10 years of system implementation. So why higher plant diversity works for increasing carbon storage? Well, it means higher fine root biomass and higher carbon inputs. And the higher those are, the more diverse those inputs are, the higher microbial activity, the more diverse would be the microorganisms living there. And that complex combination of different root systems with from different species having different root architectures, that is what we believe contributes to formation of complex heterogeneous system of soil pores, to formation of the pore architecture beneficial for maximizing this microbe contact with protective soil matrix. One thing that we've been observing lately as another mechanism through which higher plant diversity might lead to increase in soil carbon is that, well, as you probably heard, that plants exchange carbon below ground through their roots or through their mycorrhizal fungi that they share. So what we're observing is the more of such exchange takes place, and that exchange actually is more common and takes a larger, it more often happens on larger scales between the different plant species. So not in monocultures, but in in diverse plant communities. So the more of such exchange take place, the more seems of the exchange carbon or carbon on the way to being exchanged is actually lost in the soil, contributing to soil carbon gains. So increasing plant diversity then in cropping systems, either through enhancing their rotations or through cover cropping. And again, not just single cover crop, but increasing the number of species in the cover cropping systems and maybe using cover crop mixtures is probably a good way to further enhance soil carbon gains. And so here is an example from literature showing how enhancement in rotations over long term, almost in every cropping system, led to carbon gains. And on the bottom is an example from our ongoing work, just some preliminary data showing how the mixture of several cover crops led to higher microbial biomass carbon than no cover or one species. Okay, so just quick summary of what I was talking about, that, carbon comes from plants, but then it's decomposed by fauna and microorganisms in the soil. And it's only 10% of what's added by the plant will stay as soil organic matter. We can increase those gains by increasing inputs and by reducing their compositions, yet we need to think strategically at which approaches to increasing and decreasing actually work in the soil system. So, and it seems that increasing the duration of live plant vegetation, increasing plant diversity, and reducing tillage seem to be those win situation that effectively contribute to all those good mechanisms of increasing the good inputs for long-term storage and increasing the improving conditions and creating conditions for the long-term carbon protection.